And I have with me Eric Wilson. There we go. Let me just check, make sure we are going live. You guys should be seeing his screen. Yeah, moving that around a bit. Okay, and we're bad on the data rate, but yeah, hit record. Okay, and Eddie on the phone. How are you guys doing today? Okay, so my audio may be coming in on only one headset, so let me know if there's any issues. Susan, can you check on the UArtsy live page? Just make sure that it's there. Yeah, and I will check as well on this other computer. Yes, we're just getting everything set up, guys. Okay. Something, go ahead and turn it off. The live. Yeah. You're broadcasting audio. I was in a whole nother world. All right, let me just make sure I get the comments. All right, if you're watching this and you want to get some questions answered, make sure you head over to uartsy.com/p/live. Hey, Patrick, how you doing? Mortanius, hello. Hey, Robert. Hey, Eunice. Khalil, how are you guys doing? And George, that'll work for me.
You just went crazy?
Yeah, just went nuts. We're seeing this.
Yeah, let me close ZBrush. Start over.
Yeah. Susan, check. It's playing again. Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that, Robert. We tried to get it all set up, so it goes. Hello, Artist Future. All right, today we are going to talk anatomy. And you're looking at Eric's screen as he goes through Photoshop things to quit. Hey, Arcanum. Arcanum's in Colombia. Where are you guys all at? Hey, Janice. How are you? Greetings from Laguna Beach. Jacket. All right. We're restarting ZBrush. We had a little bit of some weird TV static. And then we're going to get started in just a second. Yeah, all good, Eric?
Almost. Just 1 second.
Yeah. Hey, George from Lebanon. Khalil from Boston. Patrick's from the Netherlands, late there. Brenda's from Mexico City. Giannis is from Germany. Crime Lord is from India. It's going to get you in trouble in India. What part of India, Crime Lord? We have a never-ending house in Delhi that's just like never getting finished. Patrick Tanaim, not bad. All right. Let me know you guys can see the screen. You can see Eric Wilson's screen right now, and you should be seeing the Ecorche figure. Okay, and I will take one more look over at Facebook and make sure we are over there, and I'll make sure I get a little bit live over there with questions that you guys might have. There we go. But best way to get your questions answered, to head over to uartsy.com/p/live. That's going to give me a chance to keep things, to talk to you guys a little bit easier. Peter, how are you doing? I see you over there on Facebook. Tatsuya, how are you doing? Ah, you're pulling Alvaro. Alvaro, it's been a long time since I've seen Alvaro. And Crime Lord is in Rajasthan. Love that place. Satish, San Francisco. We got Artist Future. Bullying Addiction is Texas. All right. And Robert has been practicing sculpting for 2 hours and loving the sculptress feature. Ariel is from Riverside. Awesome. Could have just come down here and done this with us here. Okay. Eric, thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
All right. So,
Yep, go ahead.
yeah. Oh, and I'm supposed to sit down. I'm over there signaling to put the camera on me. And I'm too tall, I'm out of frame, my camera woman is saying. There we go. Now I drop. All right, guys, let me tell you what we're doing here. There's a couple of things that's really important. I want to set the frame, and I want to make sure that you understand what the purpose of this is, what you can get out of it, and you know where we're going with this. All right, and part of this, and part of what I'm going to be doing, you know, now a lot more, starting to talk to you and help you understand, you know, the different aspects of doing what I do, running a business, getting messages out there, things of that nature. So this webinar, I'm broadcasting on YouTube. We're also broadcasting live on Facebook. Eric is at his home in Utah, and we're looking at his screen right now, piping that in through a computer through GoToMeeting. Okay, and we are about to run a class with Eric called Anatomy for Artists with Eric Wilson. Eric Wilson, we're going to get into, and we're going to talk to him and get his bio here in a second, because it's a real pleasure to work with somebody at Eric's caliber, and he's been around and done a lot of things that you maybe aren't aware of, because Eric's always kind of, you know, he's just been in the back kind of doing the awesome work. So it's always a pleasure that to get on here and kind of shout out Eric's name and help you guys know kind of what he's done and how awesome he is and what you're going to be able to learn. Now, in this webinar, we're going to give you some anatomy information. We are also going to give you a special deal on Eric's class, which is over at UArtsy, and I will flip to that page right now so you can kind of see that. And you can see the URL right there. It's going to be uartsy.com/p/anatomy-with-Eric Michael Wilson. All right? Probably could have made that easier. Probably could have got a simple little URL for you, but that's what you got right now, and that's where you can enroll in this. And the offer that I want to make sure that you have before we start this conversation, what's the coupon code, Susan? It's Live Anatomy. All right, so if you just click 1 payment, 3 payments, you type in Live Anatomy, it's going to save you $200. That's for you guys watching this live. That's what we're going to offer you guys. Now, let's get in and let's learn about Eric and about what Eric's doing, and especially this latest project, which, as I understand, is taking about 2 years to kind of get wrapped up. All right, so Eric.
Yes, sir.
Tell
Well,
me. Tell me. Let's start this conversation first with just what you do. Let's just do a general introduction of what you do and what you've done and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, a little bit about my background. I started, you know, I've been an artist my entire life, and then I got into sculpture at a young age. And then that led me down a kind of an interesting path, because I was in the fine arts, right? And so then I went to school for a little bit, and then I sought out directly. I thought it was in my best interest to just, instead of schooling, to seek out the best artists in the world, you know. And I kind of started here in Utah. I'm from Utah, and I started with the sculptors. There's a lot of sculptors in Utah. But then I sought out people like, as you know, Ryan, Richard McDonald, worked
Yep.
for him, and just the best figurative artists, right? And so in that journey, you know, there came a time when I realized I need to step up my anatomy knowledge in order to create, you know, fine art and the figure. And so when I hit that plateau, it was kind of something I tried to get around, and I put it off. You know, probably early 2000s is when I first started working on an a-crochet. So it's a lot, you know, there's so much information, and it's such a huge task. Anatomy is this daunting beast. And so I put it off for a while, and then I went and worked with Andrew at Anatomy Tools and co-sculpted the female figure, and, you know, worked for Richard kind of mid 2000s And then that led me to do New Masters Academy. I'm a co-founder of that, and teach anatomy, through there, and just been teaching a lot of anatomy. But something that's unique about me is I've spent hundreds of hours with cadavers. And I was telling you this the other day.
Yeah.
I've kind of tallied up my hours with live models, and it's pushing 6,000 hours teaching from and working with live models. So between live models, so live anatomy, right, and cadavers and dissection, it's really, it's been probably one of my biggest endeavors over the last 10 years.
That's awesome. And tell us about this model.
So this model, it's not my first day crochet. I've, in sculpting, and teaching, you go around and you resculpt, a crochet after a crochet, when you're teaching students, and I've done so many of those. And this a crochet, I wanted to go about it a different way. I created the female anatomy heads at New Masters Academy, and that was a very scientific, anthropometrically based project. So it was very much about measuring, and not eyeballing and not sculpting from pictures or photographs. It was about taking averages, and it took a long time. Had I sculpted that, it would have taken a few months, but it took over a year and a half. So this, I took the same approach. Instead of on a head level, the entire body level. This is based on a scan of a real person. He's 6'7", 270 pounds. He's just massive. And I could show you the flesh layer. We'll get into that in a bit. But the anatomy, I wanted it to be completely the most accurate a crochet, guessed, anymore. So these must let's just go check real quick. Did I lose you, Ryan?
Yeah.
You're back though. Okay. So
Yep.
I was simply just saying that this anatomy figure directly matches, and I've spent a lot of time making sure that the characteristics of the muscles themselves, down to that level of just tendon meets muscle fibers meets ligaments, and to the bones, it's completely accurate in of themselves, but it matches the flesh layer. And why that's really important, and there's no anatomy figures out there that do this, is so you can learn what's called morphology. And that's a big area that I put a spotlight on when I'm teaching. It's not just about anatomy, and you can see this when you dive into your anatomy studies, and you memorize things. You look at, great books like by Richet, and you start memorizing the anatomy, and then you go look at a live model. You might be learning anatomy from a male figure, and you go look at a female figure, or even a male to a male. Let's just say male to a male. You could study from this, and then you could go to a live. You could hire a model to come in to your studio for a piece you're working on, or you go to a live drawing session or whatever it may be, and they get into a totally different pose, and you're like, I don't see any of the muscles I don't see anything. I don't see any of the shapes that I've learned in anatomy. Like, why is it even relevant, right? And so that if you've experienced that, I totally get it, and I've been there many times. But there is such a thing, and this is what I'm getting at. There is such a thing as knowing too much, or learning anatomy. I like to say the wrong way. There's so much information out there that's bad information. This is something Ryan and I we've had private phone calls where we're talking about this stuff. It's really fascinating. But 90% of the anatomy out there, if you're just to Google search, like an image search on a particular muscle, 90% is going to be false information. It's just not accurate, and so that should raise a lot of red flags, for your learning, because a lot of people learn incorrect information. So when you're, that's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother story. But even when you're learning correct anatomy, and who's sculpting this, who sculpted the crochet, how much data, how much research, how much care was put into it to make sure that it was accurate. These are all questions you should have. But even if it's perfect or close to perfect or pretty accurate for the most part, the question still remains, how do I take that information, right? And how does that help me create better artwork? Am I just going to have this thing on my desk and, kind of copy it? That's one thing you could do. But it's really about cementing this relationship between the superficial anatomy. So what you're seeing in front of you, right? The very superficial layer of the muscle and how that relates to the flesh layer. That's what they call morphology. So it's the study of the shapes of the fleshy features, right? So what we see in front of us every single day. And that's really what matters when it comes down to it. So why I sculpted this crochet figure, this anatomical figure, in the position that he's in, I put a lot of thought into this pose. And every bend and degree really has kind of been thought out. In one figure, I was able to get the maximum amount of movement and range or motion, if you want to say it that way, right? So from one extreme to the other, kind of gives you an idea of where things would be in between. So you have a bent arm and a straight arm. You have a bent leg and a straight leg. The leg that's bent is forward. The leg that's straight is backwards, right? But it's all extremes. And we do that. And when we compare this to the flesh layer, it helps us understand that study of morphology. So we can see, well, what do the quads look like? What does the vastus lateralis in particular look like on a bent leg compared to a straight leg in the muscles? And then when we compare that to the flesh, what's happening? So we're really yielding the maximum amount of knowledge out of this particular figure. So that's kind of a brief overview. The goal is, if you want to get on the fast track with anatomy, is to understand a model right in front of you, or your work that you're going to be creating at the end of the day. It's really about the fleshy shapes on top. So if we can understand and compare morphology, right? We look at the flesh layer. If we can compare that to the muscle layer, right beneath the surface, and understand it, then that's kind of the maxim right there.
Yeah, let's zoom in and get a look at some of this. And I also just posted a link in the comments, as somebody was asking for a link directly to the class and to enrollment. So I want to do a couple of things for people. You kind of hit on, I think, what's one of the most significant elements, which is, when does somebody learn enough anatomy? What's the purpose of anatomy? And, you and I talk a lot about how, there can be too much anatomy, and you can actually start to get to the point, like I know plenty of people that anatomy is their thing, but they haven't taken that next step and actually made what really is the thing, like their own sculpture. It's just anatomy study after anatomy study after anatomy study. And, one of those people's really me. That was easily me, for a very long period of time, just working on getting better, But I find it's useful for people to have a guide of like when, how much. So what do you think is important for people to know about anatomy? How deep should they go in this?
That's a good question. I don't think there's a super simple answer to.
Yeah.
I think I've kind of forged this path in my career in anatomy out of the frustration that somebody else didn't do it for me. I felt, you know what I mean? Out of that frustration, there's so much to learn, and there's so much bad information I keep finding, and I'm wasting so much time. I almost got obsessive about it, right? So I think the short answer is, when you have someone who's done that like I have, right? This is me kind of projecting, but I really wish I had somebody, 15 years ago like me, to take me through the process and say, you need to know this, you need to know that. Don't get confused by this stuff out here, right? And take someone to take you by the hand, so you're really just jumping ahead, and they're pointing out this piece, and that piece. You need to know that stuff, and let me show you that in a different light, right? And until concepts start to really stick, and then everything else is like, well, you can start to see for yourself. That's really when you start to learn things, when you can look at other information and say, that's just not right. Or, like you said, Ryan, and I know there's a lot of people out there. I've even had students that know more, they have more memorized, kind of like a textbook definition or approach to things. It almost feels medical, but can they describe it? They can describe it with words, but can they describe it in shapes? And that's what art is, right? We're trying to describe something. If we're doing that with color or shape, form, and drawing, we're trying to describe something. And so I really try to get people to back up and say, the medical stuff, there's tons of anatomical reference out there, but you really have to look at it totally different. And ironically, just to kind of go off on that a little bit more, doctors, dentists, surgeons have been my most challenging students, because they think they know a lot, and they do. They know a lot of anatomy, but it's not the same thing, not even close. So it's learning to see anatomy in shapes and forms. And so I think the short answer, again, is having somebody who knows that, and that they can just walk you through it. It's not enough just to, yeah, go ahead.
And so what would you think, maybe what are 3 things that you think, 3 mistakes people make when they start to study anatomy? Areas that they might focus on that aren't useful, or something. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's okay. You're breaking up, so I couldn't hear you. Go ahead and repeat that.
So I was just saying 3 things, or a couple of things that are just common mistakes that people make studying anatomy.
Probably the most common is overwhelm, and we bring this, when we approach something like this. I like to say it's like, anatomy, the subject of anatomy is like an elephant, and the best way, right, to conquer an elephant or to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And I feel like people feel like they have to try to eat the whole thing at once.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a self-sabotaging thing, but that is kind of the number one problem that I see, is they try to do too much too soon, and maybe go down a path of, I need to memorize every definition and things and make flashcards, and then they just get overwhelmed, and then they just want to bag the project for a while. And that's totally understandable. That's what happened to me in my first attempt. But that'd be number one. Number 2, the material that they're studying from is, like I mentioned before, I touched on this, is false information or bad information. We could Google, and I point this stuff out too in the class, just so people know what I'm talking about, and we have more time to cover it. If we Google pectoralis image search, most of that information is just bad information, and it's a little frustrating, because there are some really good sources out there, really good reference. Some of it's really old, most of it, I should say. I think, in my opinion, most of the accuracy has been watered down over the years. So bad information, and then it's harder to unlearn something than it is to just learn it the right way the first time. So that'd be number 2. And number 3, I think, is just sticking with it, but finding a plan or an avenue that can get them to their goal. So I think people need to sit down with themselves and just be frank and say, well, what do I want to do? Like, how much anatomy do I want to learn? And, what is my goal? How is this very pertinent to me? And if it is, what do I want to do? Do I want to create, better works? I can build my portfolio to get a job at a studio, or is it to create my own fine artwork that I could sell in a gallery or on my own? Or, what is your goal? And that's kind of a question that I think is really important to start with. So, your approach can be tailored around that a little bit.
Got it. That's a great place for us to start too. And if we get a little bit more detailed about the pectoralis,
Yeah.
So there's all those visuals out there. The pectoralis is this fan,
Uh-huh.
and that's a great concept. But when somebody really builds that muscle up, that shape is pretty complex. And does
Right.
that shape, does the pectoralis, does it insert directly into the humerus bone, or is there a lead tendon in, or can you walk us through, because this is a really interesting setup that you have here. On the right side where the arm is extending upwards, you're seeing the fibers connect into this kind of tendinous batch, but where is this actually connecting to the bone?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's something that we end up running into a lot of times. People will end up tucking this tendon under the bicep.
Mm-hmm.
That was a challenge I remember having. And if you don't pay really close attention, um, I can see how that could be misleading, especially when the arm's down, right? Because it looks like, well, here's the bicep, and and the pec looks like it's twisting under here,
Yeah.
but it looks like it's kind of twisting and could very easily go under the biceps. So,
Right.
um, so what happens is this tendon, it's curling under. You can see it's kind of turning away from us, and then it flips over, and it kind of folds in half. If you were to like slice this in half, this area of the pectoralis major, maybe right before the tendon, you would kind of see that it folds. It does like a U shape, and we could get down to the basic parts, and those are the clavicular portion would be here, and these are going to be poly painted for the class. So you have the clavicular portion. That's just a piece coming off the clavicle, and you can follow the lines right here. This is the end of the clavicle, right? You can see there's a nice line right there, but this piece stays fairly wide and comes over here, but they all go over the bicep. And I point that one out first because you can see it goes over the bicep. These other ones are also going to fold up on each other and go over the bicep. And then to answer your question, they insert into the humerus kind of in a 4-inch line in real life, 3 to 4 inches right here. And where that gets a little tricky, it's like on the front kind of side, the insertion point is of the humerus.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the skeleton for the class too. Let me back up and put this in solo. But we've got a skull and everything. But it's kind of funny, the pec coming all the way over to here, and so does the latissimus dorsi just next to it, and then teres major. And
Eric, do you have Windows 10? What operating system do you have on this?
I'm on a Mac.
Oh, Mac. Okay. I was gonna say the Windows 10 has a screen draw.
Oh, that'd be cool.
It's about the only time I recommend Windows 10.
I have Evernote too set up for the actual class, but we're just freestyling it right now, people. So, yeah. So let me get into as we look at the pectoralis major. Let me take a look at the flesh. So, I really like to start at this level because this is where we're going with it, right? I think a lot of times a crochet has this. It's absolutely pertinent that you understand eventually in your anatomy studies, that you understand the skeleton out, right? You got to go from like an intrinsic level to understand this machine that is the body and go outward. But I think, and over the years, I've kind of developed this mentality that we need to start by understanding what we're actually seeing, and that kind of gives our anatomy, our anatomical studies, a level of sophistication and knowledge that just doing a crochet after a crochet is never going to give you. So studying from life, and studying, so from my own experience, and this is where I'm coming from, and this is a knowledge I bring into all this, is I've watched models, like athletes, Cirque du Soleil performers down to, ballet dancers, and you can really see their anatomy really well. And watching live anatomy in front of you is like, it's like magic. It really is. How many forms and different combinations of forms a single muscle can make, compared to a cadaver where there's no tension anymore. It's like these stretched out rubber bands, and it's very useful knowledge, but it's lost that life. And so I know I even used for reference in creating this, PET scan, PET, CT scan data. So that's live human anatomy where we're able to look at their muscles, when it has a tension, but we still have to recreate it. And so still today, there's no way to take this amazing model, right? And like have x-ray vision and see what the anatomy and the sophistication that we're talking about, looking at live anatomy, right? I'm talking about the difference between someone who's alive and the tension in the muscles versus like, yeah. So, in the class, we were doing just this. We're looking at live anatomy. We're looking at, why are there like 3 bumps right here on the infraspinatus? I thought it was just one muscle. Why does it not look like that on the other side? Well, there's very good reasons for that. And a lot of it has to do with this is one of those areas on the body that has a really dense fascia layer over the top of the muscle. And the way that the muscle fibers underneath that change due to specific poses change the surface form. So morphology, right? And trapezius is really awesome. So why do we have these pieces? If you look at that versus like this right here, those kind of line up. This shape right here corresponds with the shape I'm seeing on the surface. That's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
But when I come over here, why do I have these lines going down this way? I thought the muscle fibers run like this.
Seriously.
And if I'm to let's use my mask, right? I thought that was the direction of the vectors. So why there are times even when somebody's this lean, and that's what I'm about to point out is also responsible. So these vectors going like this, and also like this, that crease right there, and some of these right here are all caused by the stretching of skin, right? So as the shoulder blade is coming back and around with the arm bent back like this, the scapula, here's the medial border of the scapula, that's all really pushing this way pretty hard and down because he's flexing. See the tension here in the latissimus dorsi? You can see those individual fibers, right? These guys right here. So that's really, really pulling. He's really pulling on his lats. So because of all this tension coming back like this and pulling the arm this way too, it's kind of taken the bulk of all this meat on the other side. See how flat against the rib cage it is? So that entire area is now being condensed down to this, and it's pulling the skin along with it. So now that's what's responsible for us getting these tension lines, and it makes sense. Like if you think about, like if you were to put your fist under your t-shirt and pull it a certain way, you're going to start getting wrinkles, right? So our skin and fascia on top of the muscles are a lot like a fabric layer. So just looking at these nuances, right? That kind of stuff really brings our work to life when we understand, like, it's really about feeling and seeing in things. And like, I just created all these arrows, right? I like to think about my anatomy like that. I like to think about, where's this going? What would that feel like? Make that motion yourself. Pull your arm back. Everybody do this right now. Pull your arm back like his right arm right now and try to create as much tension. Pull that as hard and far back as you can. And you can kind of imagine like that whole area is, all those muscles are popping. They're probably full as they're going to get. And it's going to pull some of that skin back too. And this right here too, in the back here just above the armpit, same thing, right? So lots of compression. And these are animation principles. I talk about this a lot. Passive versus active side, right? Your squash and your stretch principles are found very much in real life. And so we apply these and I like to point them out all over the body. Also the gluteal fold is another great example of that. Zero gluteal fold on this side, right?
All right.
But Yeah. So, did you have a question, Ryan?
Nope.
You said-
So, but I do want to interrupt for 1 second. I'm going to make sure that everybody knows exactly where this class is. So you should see it on my screen. Anatomy, it's uartsy.com/P. I've put the comment in there, the link in the comment, sorry. Anatomy with Eric Michael Wilson. All right, and we'll make that link available for you. And then in the meantime, let's see, probably don't want to show that one. The coupon code, the way you can get a discount on this for being here live is Live Anatomy. Yeah, Live Anatomy. It's all one word, it's all uppercase, and I believe it saves you $200. Am I right? Yeah. So it's going to save you $200. It's only going to be for a limited time. So make sure you, if you want to be learning your anatomy, if this stuff is kind of important to you, then you do this ASAP because it's going to just shut down, right? And we're going to have a small enrollment period here for the anatomy class because this is kind of a master session. So it's not going to be open for multiple weeks like our spring term and things like that. All right. Now let's open this up for questions. I'm going to go back to Eric, but I want to open this up for questions and start to see. And if you're posting them in YouTube, just post them straight in there. And if you're on Facebook, right there, I'll check it. More reliable is YouTube, or is our live page, which is uartsy.com/P/live. All right, that's going to be the place to post your comment, and it's going to be the one I'm looking at literally right now. So as we switch back to you, Eric, there is one question somebody has, which is this course good for 2D artists? And we're really focused on ZBrush and elements like that, but why don't we take a second and tell people like exactly what they're going to be doing?
So is this course good or applicable to 2D artists?
Yeah, good for 2D artists.
Absolutely. One of the tenets of mastered artists, right, in classical or traditional art, and everyone's got a different understanding or definition of what that means. And what I mean by it is kind of our Florentine masters, Michelangelo and the like. They understood the body in 3 dimensions, right? Everything in nature, we live in a 3-dimensional environment, right? So you have to understand everything 3-dimensional. And if you were to draw and paint like Michelangelo did, well, that means that you're able to paint and draw from imagination. So drawing is the mother of arts, right? So here's a question, without getting too far into it. What is art about? What is your art about, right? Is it about being able to copy what's in front of you, the reference in front of you? Or is the real freedom found in being able to do whatever you want, being able to create whatever you can imagine, just make stuff up in your head and be able to put it down in some medium, right? I think everybody would agree, that's some pretty ultimate freedom, right? If you're not able to create art unless you have a photograph or something in front of you, that's pretty limiting, obviously. And there's a lot of ateliers, a lot of schools that have techniques that are solely built around this method that came about fairly new, only 300 years old, I think at most, for portraiture. When that was big business, that's what artists used to do. Like, you could get a job and make a good living just doing portraits. So yes, you want supreme accuracy. This is before like the advent of the camera even, and you can imagine that your clients would want the likeness of the painting to look like them, right? That's what they're paying for. So there's a lot of traditions from that have passed down to artists that think that that's kind of how the old masters worked, and it's just not true. That's a great method for copying and getting an extreme likeness of your subject matter, but it's not a great method if you want to make the Sistine Chapel. I can guarantee Michelangelo didn't have all that stuff in front of him, right? You can see the difference where I'm going with this. Do you want to be able to just unrestrained create amazing stuff, anything you can imagine, or is your aim, and there's no right or wrong answer, or is your aim just to do, specifically copy what's in front of you? So what anatomy affords you when you have this anatomical knowledge. And in the class, I'll break it down to these simple, this is what morphology really falls on. It falls on very simple shapes. We get into this where you're looking at like the top tier. We get into the very complicated, very, very minute shapes that show through to the surface, but we're going to start with the very simple. I'll demonstrate. I'll actually sculpt these things in very simple shapes. Like the rib cage is an egg, the end, right? So when you're drawing, if you draw and construct your figure, you're actually building. It's two-dimensional, but you're building just like a sculptor would build an egg. You're going to draw it. If I'm sculpting in clay, even not in ZBrush, doesn't matter. I do everything the same. I'm going to build that in 3D. So it's absolutely applicable. I can sit down and just draw an écorché, obviously 2D, right? I can draw an écorché from imagination. And I think that's the goal. And if it's not your goal, I'd encourage you to be open to possibly adapting that to your goals, and your aim is to be able to create from imagination. And that's what it does. This is a machine. It's like understanding the body is. It's like understanding a car. You can understand what it looks like on the outside, but you want to understand all the mechanics and everything on the inside to actually make it work. Unlike a car doesn't change shape, right? Unless it's like a transformer. But the point is, you want to understand what's responsible underneath for creating all these amazing complexity, and how can, again, I promise you guys, we're going to break this down to simpler concepts and simpler shapes, and then just kind of reconstruct that and go back up to the complicated, the secondary, tertiary forms. So I hope that answers your question. Is it applicable
Awesome.
to 2D? Absolutely.
All right, a couple more questions. And quite a few people have mentioned the face, but we'll get to that in a second. I'd say one of the questions we've got from Roman is asking, what book or resource would you recommend to study morphology, specifically morphology?
Well, I would buy, everybody should have in their toolkit, Dr. Paul Richet's Artistic Anatomy book. That's great. And I had La Femme, which was his female version. I have two copies in the original, and I think Dover Publications, one of them, they just came out with the female. Somebody translated all the French, and that's another great one.
The female?
The female.
Yeah, I just bought that a couple months ago. And it's Paul Richet. In fact, let's switch to the camera so you guys can see. This is the one, Artistic Anatomy. And Paul Richet, we're murdering the name, of course, but is the father of artistic anatomy as we kind of understand it, and in this concept of morphology. So make sure you get that. What else do you think, Eric?
There's what other books? I like this really obscure one, and it is a Dover publication.
Oh, that's right. I remember you talking about that one. I forget what it's called.
It's a yellow one, but what I like about it, and that's the thing, like, you're going to find all these anatomy books have their strong suits, and some of them didn't put an emphasis on one thing, so they kind of glazed over that in their scope of creating their anatomical study volume.
Right.
But the other one is, and I'm going to have to grab it. I'm completely drawing a blank on the name of
well, while you're thinking about this, what about Bommas? Or what about the, I don't know how they say it, the Time General Anatomy and Musculoskeletal System?
I love Time. I have those. And they were really good for me when I was learning. I got confused in his layering, when he starts isolating things, but then he would not isolate others. And it kind of, in a three-dimensional sense, it got confusing to know what muscle was on top of what, Time's great, though. Time is very thorough. But again, if I had to critique it, I'd say watch out. It's a little flat, and it makes sense. He's drawing it in Photoshop, probably is what he did all that in. So time's great though. Bombas is really good, really old. I just kind of had to go and grab things over the years uh, that I really liked, but really liked for certain reasons. So in Grey's Anatomy, I know you can buy those for cheap now. There's so many different versions and copies, and because I think it's public domain. So Grey's Anatomy has a lot of great accuracy, right? It's old and it's more accurate. That's how it tends to be. Bombas, same thing, old and accurate. Um, I think Bombas has like one of the best rib cages I've ever seen.
Mm.
Um, Another one people ask me a lot about is Elliot Goldfinger's
Yep.
um, work. Really good. If I had to critique anything, I hate to feel like I'm picking on people, but I just like to point out, like, watch out for this because it might give you some bad information. Most of it, I'm going to say most of it's great. However, I wish if I were him and I was creating that volume of work, he took these great photographs and then he has a drawing diagram of the photograph, and I think he did it drawing first and then took photos. And he should have done the photo, right? Most information, and then drawn over it so it matched. So they kind of don't match, and the accuracy is a little, maybe a little off, but it's really good. There's a lot of good stuff in there. What are some other ones? I mean, I have relied heavily on live models, which I know you don't have. That's why a scan is worth an entire book. This flesh layer, this scan right here, is worth that's a whole book of information. If we were to render it carefully and turn it in different ways and compare it to
And that's not made up. That's scan. That's real.
Yeah, real. That is based on a real person, and I've spent so much time. It's taken a long time because the anatomy right here to make sure that these muscles correlate and match. I've had my nose in a book and cadaver photos and live dissection of cadavers myself, just endlessly for years and years and years, and putting all that information into this figure. So
I got one question for you, because I think one of the tendencies that we have with anatomy is to think of muscles as like a linear A to B, insertion, origin.
Right.
And if you're looking at the sternocleidomastoid on the other side, the side where he's contracting into that, this is not a straight shot. It bends and it wraps, and then the second portion of that sternocleidomastoid that's attaching to the clavicle, it conforms to the neck at one point, and then it switches and it starts to conform to the shoulder plane and the clavicle. So it's not like just straight A to B.
No, not at all. I was kind of surprised to find that the SCM, or the sternocleidomastoid, that's this muscle right here. The different sections of it, like the front edge is really full, this is kind of round, and then it kind of tapers off. But you see this vector right here, it's like a muscle on top of muscles. The SCM is like 3 or 4 muscles in one. We think of it as one.
Yeah.
And really what we see on the the flesh layer, we're talking about morphology and how this creates the shape. We see this bump right here.
Exactly.
And then after this width right here, we kind of discount it, and we're like, well, that's the SCM. Well,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just something else.
That's
Okay.
everything else is I don't know. I don't want to know. It's too much.
I figured out number one. I know where the sternocleidomastoid is. The rest of that's, whatever. It's great.
But the rest
Love
of
it.
it's just meat.
Meat.
So when you get up into the skull, I was shocked. I remember first learning this, how wide the SCM is, like from behind the ear all the way to almost the back of the skull.
Oh.
And then the trapezius comes down to such a narrow margin right here. I was shocked.
I'm shocked.
And so my incorrect information I had about these muscles before, I found I've had to push back over the years. Like, I kept making the SCM too narrow and the traps too wide. And I'm like, no, I know better. And then I have to go and like push back, right? And that's what I was talking about before. Like, be careful where you're learning. You're getting this anatomical information. It's visual. I'm talking about visual information that is incorrect. And so I've taken my pride off the table, guys, in creating this. And that this is really important for me to say and for you to understand. My ego in like creating this piece of art, this amazing écorché figure. That would have been a lot easier to say, it looks awesome and this and that and the other. And I sculpted it. And I like to say, well, it's really been mostly about me carefully checking against live dissections and live models. And the live model part mostly, it's backed by my 6,000 hours of working with live models, but it's really based on the scan. The scan is of a real guy, a real person, right? All these nuances. Yes, I've come in and cleaned up a scan. As you know, scans are not perfect, not perfectly clean, but 97% of it was completely accurate. So coming in here, it helped me match based on cadavers. You see where I'm going? I've just tried to be very transparent, because I think the danger in learning anatomy is that an artist got hold of some information and created a book or an illustration or something with good intentions, but we don't draw. I'll never forget this lesson I learned early on. We don't draw, and we don't paint, and we don't sculpt what we see. We draw, paint, and sculpt what we think we see. Okay, so there's a huge difference. I hope you got that. We draw, right, as we interpret the world, what we think we see in front of us. And when it comes to anatomy, that's just not an okay standard, in my opinion. When you're creating a piece of reference to learn from. So I've tried to eliminate any possibility of any bad information, and that's really been, this particular project's been 2 years, but that's really been about 15 years of my life in backing this up. So anyway, just really important. Just trying to say that
that's
this
great.
is exactly.
And speaking of bad information, do you mind like lowering him below the crotch? Because Facebook has actually taken my page down once and scared the crap out of me. So
where do you want to see? I've been trying to keep the nudity out. Some people
let's
are bothered.
keep the nudity. Like let's do torso only.
Okay.
or you can put the underwear on.
I did create underwear. Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure
we are over in Facebook land as well. So.
Okay, good.
All right.
We do jock strap. Yes.
There we go. Yeah, they can't complain. We'll see. Okay, so let's get a couple more questions that people have, and I'm over here. So Kyungyo is asking, how would you go about learning subtly the subtle layers? I think he's saying the subtle fat layer and curvature of the female face. He's having a hard time establishing beauty line and curvature where edge of the female eye starts with a zygomatic mass.
So when we're talking, okay, well, let's jump up to the face. I don't have a female figure done yet. That's kind of next on my scope.
Well, you already did. You did one. It's just some other company.
Yep, for my other company, and it's as comprehensive as anything I can think of. So
yeah, I think I remember the one that you did with New Masters. That one you spent hundreds of hours, I think, doing research on that, right?
Correct.
That's awesome.
Correct. Based on a lot of, again, life scans. When you scan a person, I think we've all kind of been exposed to this, and if not, you can just go ahead and visit one of these, photogrammetry stores, right, where you guys can go and take a look, and you'll kind of be shocked. Or Ryan, do you know of any resources like where they can see a scan of an actor, so somebody that we may be very familiar with what they look like in life?
I get the life casts from like Haunted Studios or eBay.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, that's, great example. But I remember the first time I ever saw a scan of somebody I knew, I was shocked how different they looked, right? Because all the color information, all of that is stripped. And so yeah. So anyway, when we built that, when we created the female anatomy head and her flesh layer, it was very very heavily influenced by other life scans. To again remove artist or artistic interpretation, to remove human error, as it were. That was the goal. So I don't know. I know every time we do one of these anatomy classes, people are super interested in the head and neck, doing like a portraiture class. We might do one. Um, but these planes are from the male to the female. They're the same. It's the same stuff. And in the class, I like to talk about, like, on a female, this would be more this or less that. Um, so we can get into that. But he's having a hard time, to come back to the question, he's having a hard time with the relationship of the zygomatic region. Is that what he said?
Yeah.
To the eye?
Yeah, and usually, if I understand the problem, and let me find exactly the Kyonko, usually if I understand the problem, this has to do with, it's very easy to make the brow masculine. And like if we're talking the external angular process of the frontal bone, or if we're talking the superciliary arch, the glabella, those basic structures. In a male, they're much more dominant, but in a female, it's like they are sanded down.
Right. Um, yeah, if we look at this face right here, the way he's scowling, the supercilii is firing, which brings the brow in towards the nose, right? And it also is making this area of the skull a little more prominent, as that skin's getting tighter. But on a female, typically, you'll notice that because the superior orbital rim is softer, it's not, the eyes are typically, they don't look as deep set, right? Because that bone is not coming as far forward like this is showing. Some of this is skin and fat, but it's over a more prominent bony area. So in short, just to kind of echo what Ryan said, is this whole area, looking at this profile, you can see this area is more full. On a female, the nose would probably softly just come up into the glabella area, right in the frontal bone, right? You wouldn't have this big round mass right here that we find in the male. The nose is shorter, other things like that we could cover in the class and talk about how to apply all this anatomy. And I like to do that every single time. I'll like whip out a sculpture of the head and just point out some of the key differences, but in basic proportions. But just to kind of, focus on this area you're asking about, I wouldn't say that the zygomatic is necessarily, when you get down into this area, it might sit back further, meaning it doesn't come as far forward. Maybe it only comes to here. But a female face is going to be much more, if you want that youthful, or what a lot of people consider, quote unquote, beautiful, right, is a softer cheek. And that means you got more fat. So this area looks bigger. Here, let's go to a 3/4 view. You see this profile right here? See how it kind of flattens out right here?
Yeah.
On a female, that just might continue to out here in the space and be round. And what that means, if we correlate that to this side right here, that this pillar, when I say pillar, I'm talking about this right here. So this piece right here, and this is the nasolabial fold that comes down here. This whole area right here is where these muscles jump from bone to the mouth muscle area. Without getting into the names, it just doesn't matter right now. And what we end up having is this whole area right here is mostly fat, especially behind the muscles, right? So you have all these muscles that are coming this way, off of the skull. And then there's fat behind it, and the more fat you have behind them and on top of them, the more it's going to bump this area out. So just pay particular attention that that's what you're looking at on a kind of a more typical, beautiful, what people would call beautiful. It's that softness that fat creates, right? So it's the fat in the face that creates that youthful and also beautiful look. Anyway, that's kind of a long answer. Maybe it's not long enough to be satisfactory. I don't know.
Let us know.
But these borders are still of all these shapes are going to exist in a female as they do a male. You might notice that a lot of males, as opposed to females, will have like a more of this area will be showing, right? Meaning they don't have as much fat going all the way up to the lower eyelid, creating this nice rounded shape, right? It might, so this male kind of goes like doink and then doink, right? So you're getting like two shapes, and that's more typical, I think, for a lot of males. So if we're just talking about like extremes, right? Like what is the kind of a key difference between a male and a female face? So maybe that's something else to consider. It's hard to say because there's so many different face shapes, right? And characteristics. You have, even within a male, you have like a hypermasculine versus closer to a feminine feature, softer, it's a spectrum really. And then same applies to the female face. It's a spectrum of more masculine features to more feminine. And so we can really get in there, and it's really not black and white. It's very, very, it varies a lot. There's a lot of variance in there. So anyway, that's something that we definitely get into.
Okay, let's get a couple more questions here. And let me switch over so you guys know where this is, and I'll just isolate it there. Let's talk about when this is going to start. Are you cool starting last week of May? I think May 26th or so? Or do you want to start in June, first week?
Nope, that works for me. May 26th is great.
Okay, let's do May 26th, guys. And the registration's open right now. It's on the page that you'll see here in a little second. And there is the coupon code. If you're here live, check the chat, and you'll see that there. All right. And we're going to start this about May 26th. So then the next question, Eric, I'll switch this back over to your screen. The next question is, how much anatomy should somebody know to take advantage of the class? Patrick Saxon.
You could know a lot or nothing. Nothing. Because let me just say again, I wish when I started, something like this existed. And a lot of this is projection, right? I created something that I wish I had. A lot of it came from the frustration of it not existing when I was really starting out. And so my unique style of approaching anatomy has come from the way I wanted to learn it. I got really tired of course after course of like really weird. I thought they were just weird ways of doing it. I like just getting in there, just raw, and look at what is. I don't want diagrams and all this stuff that in the real world just I never found applicable. So nothing. And the reason, it's another reason, if you don't know anything or feel like you don't, or this might seem overwhelming or seem too advanced for you, I'm telling you it's not. And one of the reasons it's not is because an empty cup, if you want to use this analogy, right, is easy to fill. And a full cup is harder to fill. It'll just overflow. And so if you don't have bad habits, if you haven't been looking at a lot of stuff or learning, from a lot of courses over the years and think you know a lot, that's better. Like I would rather have that student because I can see like immediate knowledge and transformation in people that are more. Sounds like you're probably more coming from a humble place, to be honest with you. And that's great. That's great. That means you're like ready to learn, and that's a really good place to be. So I'm just saying, don't think of that as like a negative thing. Like, hey, do I need to know before I can take this class? The answer is no, absolutely not.
That's great. And I think it's really important also that you talked about that idea of overwhelm, because overwhelm, we were talking about this before, like how do you structure the class? And for me, the biggest issue with anatomy is overwhelm. You start with the skeleton, and then it's like, how does the skeleton apply to muscle? And then there's all the different epicondyles, this gesture of the humerus. There's a lot of elements.
So talk to me for a sec about how you're going to teach this. Live, pre-recorded demos? What's the way you're going to present?
I love to do it live. I've had really good feedback doing it live in the past because you know, if there's some hangups in the class, you guys are there and we have a moderator, and the moderator can kick those questions over to me immediately, and that's really the value you're getting. It's not highly edited. I don't speed through it and give you like the highlights and show you, you know, and cut out parts where I'm messing up if I'm doing a demo. I believe there's value in all of that. So it is live, and yeah, it's the overwhelm. Let me just say, I got to touch on that, Ryan. The overwhelm is really addressed because I don't want you guys to get overwhelmed. And I think I like to say it like this: I'm too lazy to do things the hard way. So that's kind of been my approach to anatomy. I'm too lazy to do it the hard way, you know, and like, I don't want to be a walking, talking anatomical encyclopedia, you know. That doesn't matter, and that doesn't give us results, you know. I can tell you there's a lot of masters that have spent a lot less time than a lot of students on their anatomical quests. Let me say that again. There's a lot of masters that spent in their lifetimes a lot less time studying anatomy than a lot of professional students, I should call them, professional anatomical students. You know, and the reason is they grabbed on to the things they needed to know and they ran with them. And that's really what I'm going to give you in this class. I'm going to say, look, we want to understand how to sculpt an arm today. And today we're going to learn how to do that. And then we're going to do it, you know, and then I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to show you, I'm going to point everything out and verbalize what we're looking at. And then I'm going to sculpt it. And then you're going to go do it. Or you're going to draw it, you know, and you're going to study. And that's the fast track, like a day for an arm, right? Or a day for the upper arm, a day for the forearm, you know, which is really complex. That's the goal, is like, how much do I need to know? What do I need to know? And it's really about how to learn and how to look at something. That is the habit that we're going to cultivate.
Cool. Patrick, does that answer your question? And Garlic Knight Drew is asking, do you have to use ZBrush for this course? Can you use pencil and paper?
You can totally use pencil and paper. I didn't pick up ZBrush until about 6 years ago. Before that, I was all clay, all practical. Ryan knows this. Ryan and I for like 10 years. You know, I come from a practical world. Like, I drew and I painted and then I sculpted, and then I went and worked on movies and stop motion animation sculpting, and you know, and then I picked up ZBrush. And it doesn't matter what your medium is. But learning the anatomy, I did it in ZBrush because it's the best way that I can show you guys anatomy. It's by far the best way. So think of it that way. It's like the source of knowledge is coming from ZBrush is the best way to package that source, right? So then you can go and do whatever you want to do with it after this.
Got it. And Quincy's saying, I took this class last year and it was a great class. I'm just watching it live to hear his lectures, which are very helpful. Take this class, it's dope. Is there a way to get these scans for studying? And a couple of people have asked about the 3D model, and they've asked about what's included in the class in terms of resources and things like that to help them.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not going to give away, obviously, the Say Crochet because it will be, it is 3D printing as we are speaking, and it's something that I'll be selling. So obviously, I'm not going to give away that. But on the flesh note, I do have other scans of this guy, of this model, that aren't touched up 100%, and they're in different positions. So they would I think they would be a great, you know, if you wanted to just like dig down, like I suggest we do. We look at the morphology and then we scope down. That's something I'll just commit to you right now. That will be part of the class. I will hand you these other scans, and you're welcome to. And what we've done in the past, say somebody wants to sculpt a female, they're not really interested in, like, you know, Greek god of a scan of a human, and so they would rather focus on a female and do anatomy. And you're welcome to do that. And so their scans are cheap, right, Ryan? They're like $40.
They are 40 bucks, yeah. And I have about 18 scans. If you switch over to my camera, you guys can see, I'll show the backside. This is a 3D print of one of my scans, and I got about 18 of Lisa in different poses. And so these will be included as well. I'll let you guys know about that. So we'll make sure that there's a bundle. There's some resources for you in there. And then I also am a big fan of 3D scan stores, so I'm always over there grabbing stuff, especially when it goes on sale.
Yeah, and it gives you the option. You have many options to choose a scan or a model that appeals to you, and then we'll just take the anatomical knowledge we're learning here, and you can go and sculpt it in the pose and the model that you like, and that's what we've done in the past, or draw from, or whatever it may be.
Cool. Mr. J, I agree with Eric. I think ZBrush is probably the best way to learn anatomy. I think there's, was it 10 years ago I started ZBrush workshops with an anatomy course. And because it's easier than clay, you can see through, you can get cross sections, there's a million ways that you can teach it. So I recommend it. Patrick, great, glad to hear. Mine Loom, it would be good if you repeat your question instead of me having to search. So do me a favor and repeat your question, Mine Loom. And I'll see if I can please answer your question. Otherwise, I'm gonna give you a little time here, my friend, but I think we are pretty much solid on our questions. Let's check out Facebook. Do I need the full ZBrush program? And no, core will work just fine.
And isn't Sculpture still free? All right.
Say that again? Oh, Sculptress is free, yeah.
Yeah, so the barrier to entry for you guys is probably like, minimum system requirements on a computer and a tablet. You can buy used.
Right.
Mine's like 10 years old and still prefer it over any other one, And yeah, so, but again, I mean, if I were me 10 years ago watching this this demo, and I only knew clay back then, that person too is still totally welcome, and it's going to apply to you every bit as much as somebody who's in ZBrush. Okay, so if you feel like you're most comfortable in clay, this class still applies to you.
Cool. Dynamical 3D. Hello to you. Okay, Amber is saying I took Eric's class before, yeah, but now I'd like, and especially with the new features. Okay, great. Glad to hear, Amber. All right.
What a return.
Ezekiel Dev, hey there. MJ, good. Okay. All right, guys, I think we are pretty much there. I think the last question we'll have is from Lightmind VFX. Since the topic of the head is so vast, will there be just basic overview, or will it be an in-depth discussion? And I think we kind of hit on that earlier, Lightmind VFX. But what do you have to say for that, Eric?
What I'm planning to do is 2 days, and we're still thinking like 3 hours a day, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
So 3 hours on the head, that includes demos, me walking through the entire thing. And that includes the skull, guys. Just to kind of answer your question and get into a little bit of what matters most. And when it comes to the head, it is the skull. So I have a skull alone, and the skeleton. So we'll start with that, and we'll get into the skeleton more in depth than we will the rest of the body when it comes to the head and neck. But there will be an entire day dedicated to the head, an entire day dedicated to the neck, and then we'll tie them together. Beyond that, every time, Ryan, people in this course seem to really want me to spend my time on the head and the neck. So maybe when the class is over, we talk about doing like just a complete portrait class.
Love it.
I'm open to that. And I would love to actually I'd love to mix medium and do sculpting in clay as well.
Okay. And Patrick is asking, do you already know the timing of the course? I mean hours. So we just talked about that, about 3 hours. We're going to start May 26th, if that's a Saturday. So we'll just have to confirm that. And we usually do this either 10 a.m. or 1 p.m. Pacific time. So it'll be one of those time zones. We'll check in with Eric later, but since he's in, I think you're 2 hours ahead of us, or an hour?
Just 1 hour ahead. I think
Just
it
1
has
hour.
to be. Yeah.
Yeah, so we usually did it 10, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, and Crime Lord, this isn't about tools, it's about anatomy itself. I think that's pretty accurate.
It's
Yeah.
true. No matter what your
Totally.
tool set is.
Yeah. Amber, yeah, we'll probably be in there using Sculptris Pro to some extent. And if Eric won't, I will. Hey, Frank, how you doing? Mr. J, just wanted to thank you guys for the interview. I've taken one of your courses before, Ryan. It was amazing. Look forward to taking Eric's. Awesome, Mr. J. And Yannick, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Will there be any assignments with review, feedback? And you're pretty solid with feedback, right, Eric?
Yeah. I take a lot of feedback. I ask people and encourage you. Are you going to create a dedicated place in workspace for this class, Brian?
Yeah, just like last time. So I'll put this, I grabbed a couple of things for people. Eric doesn't see this because he's not seeing my screen. I'm piping him in. But if you're looking at my screen, you'll see the anatomy class from March last year. And you can see Adam's work, Pavlo's work, right? And if we can come in, I just love what Adam Maurice did. You know, it's very beautiful work, a lot of gesture in it, and it produced just an amazing piece for him. So it's this kind of thing, and each week Eric is going through and reviewing that. You can see the development, that's in Jason Martin's class. You can see the development using the skeleton, pulling all this stuff together, establishing overall forms. You know, I was amazed at what Adam did. So it's really cool. But there you go. All right. Okay, well, I think that is about it. All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. Eric, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Absolutely. All right, guys, head over to UArtsy. It's not there on the homepage yet because you're getting the early discount. Check the chat for the discount. Susan, do you mind posting that coupon code again? Just so you guys know, because for being here live, and this coupon code will be active for a little while, but it's going to save you a chunk, big chunk. All right, and I want to make sure that you got the resources that you need. So head over to UArtsy, sign up for this. You're going to get the course, which is 10 weeks with Eric. I'm going to throw some stuff in there. You're going to get a scan library from me. You're going to get some scans and some écorchés from Eric. And you're going to be put into our Artist Awake group, which is where we've got about 1,000 kind of active students in there now, where we're all just kind of growing and helping each other. All right, some of those are the people that are in my boot camps. Some of those are the people in classes like this. Frank's in the boot camp. And you know, it's just a nice place to be, to grow and to post work and get really quality feedback. Not Facebook feedback, quality feedback. All right, Carlos, take care. Joshua, Comics Legend, Roman, George, Kyungyo, Patrick, you are welcome, my friend. All right, Eric, take care.
All right. Hey, thanks
Thank you so much.
everybody for coming.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted.
Nope, it's all good. I was just saying thanks to everybody.